Hello and welcome into my home. I am Jillian MacPhee. Garden Stories is a series that looks into the lives of some of Edmonton's most prolific gardeners, farmers, designers, and artists. We will be touring through their personal landscapes and discussing how they grew to love gardening, what inspires them, and how gardening has made a difference in their lifestyles. I myself grew up on a grain farm surrounded by family. My grandparents lived across the road, and my aunties, uncles, and cousins lived only miles apart on their farms, just a few short turnoffs down the same gravel road. We all grew up sandwiched between the two small towns of Gibbons and Redwater, located northeast of Edmonton. Back then, doors were always open and neighbors often popped in bringing treats. Sometimes in the spring and in the summer, farm wives would bring clumps of flowers they had divided from their perennial flower beds. Judy Allen, a dairy farmer from down the road, gifted me my first clump of primulas before I was of school age. That cluster grew, was divided, and planted into many more areas in the yard. In the summer months, I have memories of standing at the same height and face to face with gladiola blossoms in my grandmother's garden. At harvest time, siblings and cousins dug for potatoes like we were panning for gold. As I sprouted up in the family garden, my love for digging and propagating plants grew with me. When it was time to get my first summer job, I made my way to Hull's greenhouse. Lois and Ted Hull ran a successful garden market out of their farmyard that eventually grew into a family greenhouse business, which they ran with their sons, Bill and Jim. Lois Hull's community involvements and accomplishments continue to live on with her legacy today. Hull's greenhouse is where I met Bob Stadnyk. My own garden and life story would not have been the same if I hadn't met this incredible man. Many Alberta gardens and stories would not have been as unique, colorful, and interesting without the influence of Bob's passion, knowledge, ability to share, and teach everything there is to know about gardening in Alberta. Bob and I were all set to tour his garden together and share a few stories with you. However, he passed before we could share a visit. With Bob's blessings, Joseph Gadbois, his very close friend, pupil, and colleague, the person I believe set to carry Bob's torch, walked with me through Bob's garden as we took a beautiful stroll down memory lane. Joseph and I are very honored to show our admiration of our respected friend as we tour his private garden and tell Bob's garden story. Joseph, thank you for joining me. We are in a very, very special place that I feel quite honored to be visiting. We are in Bob Stadnyk's personal garden, and I've brought you here because he has been such a large part of both of our garden stories, and also because you know how to name and identify a lot of these plants that he has collected. So yeah, thanks for coming, and thank you for taking me for the tour.
Yeah, this is, there's not a lot of gardens like this.
No.
Especially in Alberta. Mm-hmm. It's a very intense garden.
Yes.
It has multiple different biomes. Mm-hmm. You know, it's almost like a mini botanic garden.
Truly, it does remind me of a miniature Bouchard gardens, mm-hmm. for sure. And the thing about this garden too is that a lot of the plants here, only few people are probably happy or lucky enough to have them in their own yards. And yeah. If they do, a lot of the collectors and gardeners across Alberta, they have them because of Bob.
So I got into gardening growing lady slipper orchids, mm-hmm. The outdoor hardy kinds, the native kinds. And so I started going to Hull's when I was about 11 years old. Mm-hmm. And one of the first orchids that I ever got was a pink lady slipper, Cypripedium macaulay, mm-hmm. which is the floral emblem of Prince Edward Island. Mm-hmm. And Hull's was the only place anywhere around here that had anything like that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so, obviously you get this little 11-year-old kid with his mom coming in buying the most expensive, rarest plants. It's going to draw some attention.
Yes.
So, and I was a really shy kid. So Bob always made sure to come and say hi to me whenever I was there and try to talk me into some other things.
Yes.
Right? The first time that he ever said, "You need this," to me was in reference to a clematis stole white gold, which was, I think it was a new variety at the time. This would have been like in the mid 2000s.
Yes.
So he brings me over to the vine section. "You need this," and it's got kind of the gold leaves and the blue flowers. And I was thinking to myself, I don't give a crap about clematis. Why are you showing me this, right? Because I was really just there for like the rare stuff. But I never forgot that plant. So as my horizons broadened with age, obviously I revisited that plant and I went, oh yeah, it is a great plant.
It is a great plant. I've got them all throughout my yard.
Yeah.
Yes. Probably because he said, "Jillian, you need this." Because he still says that today.
Still says it to this day.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
So I've known him since I was about 11 years old. So over 20 years.
Yeah.
I've known the man, which is kind of crazy.
Bob had a huge interest in alpine gardening. He spent much of his time climbing mountains and exploring alpine regions. He admired the mountain fauna and took notes of the cruel environment alpines thrived in. His observations inspired him to experiment with recreating the terrains he had visited in order to successfully grow unique alpine plants he had seen on his adventures. Bob created miniature mountain landscapes using rocks and fine gravel in his own yard, in trial gardens at the University of Athabasca, and in an alpine display garden at Holes. He had great success growing these unique plants and shared his knowledge with local growers. Together, Bob and these growers created a whole new selection of alpine perennials, ready for the public to add to their private collections. Many people were introduced to alpines and alpine gardening by Bob Stadnyk. His spirit is woven through many rock and perennial gardens throughout the province. Because he always has a curiosity. He always looks really, really close at plants. He's very inspired by them. So like alpines are something that you have to get down to the ground, really close to the ground, and really take a look at the foliage and all of the intricate sort of differences between things. And he is very much a collector. And inspired by really unique tweaks in plants. So.
And he always said that with alpines, it just amazed him how they're able to thrive in such harsh environments. You have this super short season. You have these extremes in temperatures between winter and summer. You have, drought conditions, and you have lack of nutrients and all those kind of things. So, like he just always talked about how that blew his mind, especially seeing them in the wild. And so this was kind of his way of bringing the mountains home.
Yes.
Right?
Well, and the bloom time. So a lot of this is out of blossom now because a lot of the bloom time is sort of spring and early summer. However, the foliage is still really, really interesting. And he's intermingled it with some really interesting different textures and perennials. And so the bloom times, there's always something to look at for sure. Joe, over here, Bob has 3 different cypress. And it's very interesting to me because they are all related, but they're all so very different. So it's interesting that he's clustered them together, don't you think?
Yeah, and it's, I suspect here he's showing off the differences in color and texture because, Bob is all about contrast when he's doing a garden, which is the way to do it. And so it works because they like the same conditions, but you also have, 3 similar but different looking plants. You've got, the Russian cypress in the back is a little bit more heavier textured compared to the threadleaf types, and you have the different colors, and then you have the smoke bush off to the side in the back there, which has the kind of yellowish color. And you've got the sort of pine and the juniper and the spruce, and it goes well together, but it also contrasts.
You know, and it's very interesting too when we do take a look at this, because there is a pattern in landscaping where it's like evergreen, shrub, perennial, ground cover. And here he's got evergreen, 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 ground cover. And it's still showcasing, exactly like you said, different colors, different textures, and making a really beautiful statement. That smoke bush is gorgeous. You know, usually when you see the smoke bush, it is the purple smoke bush. I love seeing that nice bright green. I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
There are a lot of ground covers here. There are some really, really hardy plants that are quite tough. And then Bob also grows some really tricky things that are tender and manages to make them thrive. So what do you think? Is he just a person who likes to experiment, or yes?
He is a person who likes to experiment, push the boundaries of things. But he also, I think that when he's deciding how to put a garden together, it's not necessarily about how difficult something is to grow. It's about growing it properly, whether it's easy or hard. You know, if you take hens and chicks, which are very easy to grow, and you put it in a wet location, it's going to rot.
Yep.
So every plant does have requirements, and some plants are easier to satisfy than others. Some plants are more lenient than others are. So, you know, this garden has plants that are very specific about the conditions they have to have, and he provides those conditions for those plants, but he does so because it's worth doing.
Yeah.
Because the plant has qualities that redeem it, despite the fact that it's a little bit persnickety.
Yes.
Right?
Okay, so that's why the alpines, they are not planted in like rich
clay.
Like he's created an
it's
alpine.
gravelly soil. It's got the limestone top dressing, right? You know, and he's got pieces of slate and different things, you know. So the plants are growing on very lean soil that drains exceptionally well, which is what alpines universally require.
Yes.
You know, and certainly there's some plants that Bob has tried that just won't survive in our climate, and that's just the way it is. Yeah. But he still tried it.
Yes, exactly.
You know,
and there are ones that he's tried that, like, he's got quite a few zone 5s in here, and I think that's because he's created, this is his own microclimate. Like, his world, he's created his own little world here in this garden.
And I would also say that both from having this garden and also from trialing in other locations, he's proven a lot of plants are hardier than what the internet tells you or what books tell you, right?
Earlier on, Joe, you did point out that the cypress were all growing together and growing together beautifully because the environment that Bob had created allowed for that. And as we're traveling through the garden, I'm noticing how the different ground covers and alpines are intermingling beautifully as they would in nature. But that's because he's intentionally recreated nature so that they will succeed.
That's right.
Yes. And so when he is, you know, teaching children or teaching us adults about gardening, he's bringing us back to nature and showing us not only how to appreciate it in a man-made landscape, but when we go back out into the world, or when you go hiking, for example, we can find those plants outside where they naturally live.
Yeah, and you know, when you are, so I think, and I know Bob would agree, that if you are gardening, if you're a gardener, it's very valuable to go out into the wild and see how plants are growing in nature, because it is going to inspire you from a design perspective, and it's also going to inform you from a gardening perspective, a horticultural perspective, of how you should try to put things together. It's hard to grow a plant if you don't understand what it wants. And the best way to understand what it wants is to look at its natural habitat. You know, so when I look at this, I mean, you have plants from all over the world in a very small space. We have plants from Asia meeting plants from Europe, meeting plants from North America, but they all grow in the same kind of habitat, so that's why they work well together. And if you go to the Rockies, which are just a few hours away, you'll see how similar the plants grow in nature. Right?
That's so interesting. That is just like a really large light bulb that went off in my head, because I go out into the woods and I love what I'm seeing in the woods, and I love to garden. And for me, gardening, it's almost about being control and controlling the environment. And so perhaps some of the areas that I am not succeeding in are because I need to lose a little bit of that control and create a natural habitat.
Yeah, you do. You definitely do want to think about that angle of it. But don't get me wrong, I mean, this garden is entirely under Bob's control.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's very meticulous about how it looks, down to the very finest details.
Yes.
You know, down to shop vacuuming elm seeds out of the thyme.
Yes.
You know, but when you're putting it together, especially in the early stages, just kind of thinking about the conditions that the plants need, and how they're going to fit in together. So, you know, this area is kind of the sunniest, hottest part of the yard. So this is where he's put the plants that kind of required those conditions, and the soil is all prepared properly.
Yeah.
This is a very special plant. This is Ligularia altaica, and it's special to me because it brings back childhood memories. So when I was like 12 or 13, I read an article in Spring Gardening magazine, which was an annual publication that Holes put out. And Bob wrote the article, and it was talking about this plant. And they had partnered with a university locally in Alberta to bring the seed in and trial these plants and try to introduce them to the marketplace. And so he did that, and the thing is that the seed is not a great germinator.
Okay. Yeah.
So they had kind of limited numbers to release. And so he's got a couple plants in his yard here. His sister's got a couple plants. I don't know of anybody else that has it. And I'm sure there are people out there that probably have it from back in the day. But what's amazing about it is Ligularias get tall. This year, this one didn't get as tall as it can. These have been over 8 feet tall.
Yeah.
They're just amazing. And it has a very different leaf from what a Ligularia normally has. Again, like the heat has had its effect on it. They don't love the heat.
Yeah.
But this plant is capable of being spectacular.
Bob continued to educate and inspire Joseph and I at Greenland Garden Center. Bob respected creatures big and small. Daily, Bob would sneak catnip to the greenhouse cat named Luna. He called Luna his queen. His garden is a safe haven where people, plants, and animals coexist. Welcoming birds, pollinators, and insects into a garden adds another level of nature's magic to observe. Creating a sanctuary by nurturing plants and animals is good for our souls. I have visited Bob's garden many times over the years. We have often sat on the deck, taking in the day and enjoying a sandwich or a slice of his famous blueberry cheesecake. Even Bob's cheesecake had a story tied to nature. Bob made an annual trek up north to Rochester, a small hamlet in Athabasca County, to go blueberry picking in the surrounding terrain. Sitting on the deck, enjoying homemade cheesecake and sharing a laugh in Bob's garden was always a treat. The sun seems to shine brighter, the earth seems to be warmer, the plants larger, and the flowers more beautiful and fragrant.
You know, something Bob always said to me is that if you have spiders in your yard, it's a sign that you have a healthy ecosystem. And his yard has a healthy ecosystem. I mean, you come in here and there's all kinds of different, you know, birds and and wildlife in general that live in this yard. They've made this yard their home. It's pretty incredible. And it's impossible not to come here and be inspired. You can come here 50 times and every time that you visit, you take something else away. When you leave.
I think I've been so focused on each individual plant, and I know that the combinations have been so artfully done, but now just to get that sense of they've also been naturally done and inspired by nature and their environments, it really truly just gave me an aha moment. I wonder if Bob was inspired by Bouchard Gardens.
I think he's been inspired by a lot of different places. I'm sure that's one of them. Undoubtedly, I think that he's drawn most of his inspiration from places he's seen in the UK. I mean, he always talks about going to Edinburgh and seeing the Botanic Gardens there. That was like his dream. That's his happy place.
Longwood Gardens too.
Longwood, there's tons of places. Tons of places.
He's been many places actually.
So, but I mean, you can definitely see in the way that he creates the pathways and using a sort of a stone pathway like this, it's not like a unique thing, but it's beautiful. And I love what he does in the alpine garden with the elephantine between. What is unique is using lawn as a path. Right? So the first time I came here, when I saw that, I was like, that is a very interesting way to use turf grass. Because I've never seen that before.
And he hasn't had the time to sort of manicure it at the moment, but usually this is like perfect.
Yes.
Like completely edged and perfect.
He edges it with shears.
Yeah.
So he literally gets on his hands and knees and edges it with shears.
Yeah.
He will not use like any kind of a like maintenance trimmer or anything like that.
No.
Yeah, it's
pretty
hardcore.
Yeah. So it's built to tour and to really take your time and see and enjoy. And people, if you get invited into this space to tour it, it's a pretty fortunate event for sure, because he is, as much as he loves to share and embrace the community and connect with people and inspire people, he's also a very private person, and this is his private little oasis. So if you're welcomed into this space, then
it's a real privilege.
It's a privilege for sure. I feel honored every time I'm here.
When Bob was in his yard, he was not an old man with a crooked back and a spade in his hand. He stood straight up, thin, strong, and healthy. His shock of red hair eventually faded to strawberry color over the years, but his smile and heart remained joyful and large. He could spend hours being lost in his work, visiting the mountaintops in his rock garden, relaxing in the sun amongst his cactus and succulents, and enjoying Europe in his lush perennial borders. Bob was a dreamer and a doer. If an idea came to mind, it turned into a project. His mind and body never sat still. Bob was always imagining, creating, and gardening. Bob's garden is a reflection of his imagination, an accumulation of his passions and knowledge. My garden and many gardens throughout the province have Bob's influence and story woven throughout them. I remember working with Bob when Stowick's gold clematis first arrived on the scene, as well as many other perennials that came into the light because of his love of conversation. Bob formed many friendships with growers across Alberta, Canada, North America, and Europe. Our gardens are not only a reflection of Bob's influence, but also carry the stories of his friendships and accomplishments of his local and worldwide gardening community. Our seemingly small backyards have a large reach and connection to many parts of the world, greatly due to an admiration of nature, gardening, knowledge, and connecting with others. Bob's garden story is incredible and will continue to grow. Garden experts and enthusiasts like Joseph Gadbois will continue to share his legacy and ensure there is always something unique and beautiful to admire, plant, and grow. In the next episode, I will be taking you on a tour of a microfloral farm located in Strathcona County, Alberta. You will meet Janice of Jillian Florals as her and I stroll through the flowers and chat. Janice is a master gardener and floral artist who believes in growing and designing sustainably and organically. We will not be treeing rows upon rows of flowers in a field, but instead we'll be climbing stone staircases, walking through the aspen woods, and coming upon raised flower beds in the middle of a glen. Janice and I talk about gardening and growing cut flowers, creating bouquets for special occasions, and how gardening has influenced her and her family's life.